Welcome back to World History. This is the last video that we will be covering this week. So please make sure that you've done all of the work that's been assigned so far in this week, and make sure that you get ready for next week, the last week of school. Last thing we talked about was the Battle of the Coral Sea, a conflict resulting in more or less a stalemate between the two sides. Neither side really won this conflict between the U.S. and Japanese Empire, but it did stop the Japanese advance. Another important turning point in this war was the Battle of Midway Island. Midway Island, by the way, is located northwest of Hawaii, just a little ways. Although Japan sent a large force to take control of the island, the U.S. knew about the invasion in advance and surprise attacked the surprise attackers. Several Japanese aircraft carriers were destroyed and the invaders were forced to retreat. So in this battle, the U.S. Dramatically won the case. Still trying to destroy the U.S. fleet, the Japanese planned the attack on Midway to secure a land base closer to Hawaii. The significance of the American victory in the Battle of Midway was that it restored the balance between the two navies in the Pacific. Another consequence was that the terrible loss of aircraft and men left the Japanese with very few experienced pilots. Japanese losses included 4 heavy carriers, 1 cruiser, 322 planes, and 3,500 men. U.S. losses included 1 heavy carrier, 150 planes, and 307 men. The 2 crucial factors in the victory were the cracking of the Japanese code and the fact that the Japanese did not realize the USS Yorktown had been repaired and was available for the battle. Turn in your books, please, to page 502, and I want you to read the box entitled Breaking the Japanese Code. Once you've finished reading that paragraph, please turn over to page 504 and read the box called The Navajo Code Talkers. Once you've finished reading those 2 boxes, please unpause the video and we will continue. After this battle, Japan was placed on the defensive for the rest of the war. Rather than conquering, with this in mind, rather than conquering every island that the Japanese possessed, Americans began employing the island hopping strategy to win the war. The plan was that the U.S. would seize only good sites for its air bases. They bypassed Japanese troops on other islands, and after bypassing them, they had cut them off from the Japanese Navy, and so they would just have to wait it out until the end of the war. Saved lives and saved time. Fighting proved to be very difficult. The fact of the matter was few Japanese actually surrendered. Most died in battle or committed suicide rather than face the dishonor of surrender. Banzai charges. Maybe you've heard this phrase before, but this was named because of the war cry shouted by the Japanese troops. So it was named after the war cry. Waves of Japanese soldiers, some even without weapons, would charge American infantry positions only to be slaughtered. Think of it as this suicide run to try to do something to curtail the American invaders. For most, they believed that by dying for their emperor, it would send them to their version of heaven. Another form of suicide death was the use of kamikaze planes. These were suicide pilots who would crash their bomb-filled planes into American ships in an attempt to sink them. Although such attacks caused great damage, they failed to halt America's advance toward Japan. But it did reveal just how determined the Japanese people were. The return to the Philippines. In 1944, MacArthur and his forces returned to the Philippines and helped liberate the islands. In the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the Japanese lost 40 ships, the last of their navy, and thus any chance of launching another naval attack. So we return to the Philippines. MacArthur is able to claim, I have returned, as he had promised, and the Philippines are liberated from the Japanese. Two more battles we'll mention, Iwo Jima and Okinawa. For U.S. bombers to be able to get to Japan and back safely, the taking of these two islands were necessary. Tiny Iwo Jima was bombed for 72 hours before the U.S. invaded it, hoping to soften up the resistance. Even after the bombing, U.S. casualties were high. Of the more than 21,000 Japanese fighters on the island, only 216 surrendered. The rest died. Later, the island of Okinawa, just 350 miles from Japan, was also captured, also with similar loss of life from Japan and the loss of life on Americans, too. Letter D, Allied victory in Europe. Let's end this war. Number one, the Soviets began establishing totalitarian governments in which they conquered. In Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Poland, and other places, instead of liberating the people like Stalin had promised he would do, they simply replaced Nazi tyranny for Soviet tyranny. This is a foreshadowing of the up-and-coming Cold War that would follow World War II. Number two, the Battle of the Bulge. As Allied forces advanced on the border of Germany in December of 1944, German armored troops suddenly attacked a weakly held section of the Allied line. Despite some initial success, the German drive halted as the Allies forced the Germans back. By the end of January, the Germans had been put back in their original position. It's called the Battle of the Bulge because it creates, as you see on this map, creates a literal bulge in the lines that the Germans created. Also recognize this will be Hitler's last German offensive. Last attempt. He was hoping maybe to divide the Allied line up more, force them to declare a ceasefire or something. I don't know what he was trying to do. He was losing it, and he needed a way to hope on something. Well, this last German offensive fails, and now Germany's about to lose everything. This attack wasted much of Germany's remaining strength and probably hastened the end of the war in Europe. Number three, the Yalta Conference. Another conference was held among the leaders of the Allies, and this conference would deal with the consequences of Germany after the war. Such things included disbanding the army, paying reparations, as well as dividing Germany up into zones of occupation. Unfortunately, one of the things that the Yalta Conference did was it recognized Soviet control over Eastern Europe. Churchill and Roosevelt gave in to Stalin's wishes in return for promising to help fight the war against Japan. At this point, the fear was the war in Japan could last for years, and so with Soviet help, maybe they could help end the war sooner. Stalin did promise fair and free elections, but those were all lies, and everyone knew it. Turn to page 505. Wow, I didn't even realize we were in the 500s already, but 505, and please read the box entitled Yalta Conference to yourself. Once you've finished reading the box, please unpause the video, and we will continue. Number four, the advance to Berlin. The Allies halted west of the Elbe River. Although the Allies could have proceeded to Berlin first, they probably would have been first there. Because of the Yalta Conference, Berlin had been promised to the Soviets. So you can see on the map here, the Elbe River is located right here. They could have made it to Berlin, and that probably would have freed up more of Germany after the war, but the Yalta Conference had promised that territory to the invading Soviets. On April 30th, 1945, Hitler, seeing the end near, committed suicide in his underground bunker. Please don't believe the false TV cable shows that think, oh, Hitler escaped and got away and made it to South America. I know they make a lot of good money off of it, but you'd think that if Hitler had done that, they would have found him by now, maybe. Of course, he'd also be about 150 years old at this point, but that's a whole nother story. So he dies on April 30th, 1945. The next day, German radio announced that Hitler had died at the head of his troops, fighting a campaign of heroic efforts there. Well, yeah, no, he committed suicide. His aides then burned his body with gasoline. On May 7th, the Germans unconditionally surrendered. And on May 8th, 1945, the Allies celebrated VE Day. VE stands for Victory in Europe. The war in Europe was over. Number 5, the Potsdam Conference. 2 months later, the three Allied leaders met at Potsdam to discuss the future of Germany. Yet by this point, the leaders had changed. Harry S. Truman was now, as you see pictured in the middle in the chair, was now president. FDR had died in April. Also, Clement Attlee, pictured on your far left seating in the chair, he represented Britain. Churchill shockingly had been voted out of office in 1945. At Potsdam, the Allies issued an ultimatum to Japan: surrender or be destroyed. The cause for such confidence was the atomic bomb. If you look at page 506, by the way, it shows you a map of the World War II European theater and the operations involved. I know it's kind of a little delayed, but now you can see everything that happened there. Letter E, the Allied victory in the Pacific. Since the capture of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the U.S. had been using incendiary bombs to level Japanese cities. In a one-night raid against Tokyo, for example, fire destroyed nearly 16 square miles of the city, and more than 80,000 people died. Yet the leaders in Japan refused to surrender. Many American strategists feared that a land invasion of Japan would be necessary and hundreds of thousands of lives would be lost. Some thought as many as 1 million American soldiers would die, and of course you can imagine the Japanese death toll would be even higher. So in an effort to shorten the war and save lives, Truman ordered the use of the atomic bomb. Sites included Hiroshima and Nagasaki. On August 6, 1945, the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. It wiped out 4.7 square miles of the city and killed an estimated 70,000 people, and yet Japan refused to surrender. So on August 9th, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. On August 14th, Japan surrendered. The bomb dropped on Nagasaki was the last one remaining in the American arsenal. Had the Japanese not surrendered, it would have taken a long time to manufacture another bomb. Neither the Japanese nor the rest of the world knew that the U.S. only had those two bombs. Question might be asked, should Truman have used the atomic bombs? That topic has been debated ad nauseum by many historians, but I think it was, because it needed to end the war. It saved lives in the end. On September 2nd, 1945, on a very testable date, the last testable date, Allies celebrated VJ Day, Victory in Japan Day, and the end of World War II. Japan and Allied peace terms were signed aboard the USS Missouri, anchored in Tokyo Bay. For your homework, you guys will have a quiz, pages 499 to 507. 499 to 507, plus 2 homework assignments, page 205 and 206, which is a reading section over the war in the South Pacific. Please answer the 5 questions. And then page 205, 206, and 207 and 208, a little girl's memories of bombings in Berlin. Please read those 2 pages as well, and that'll be your homework. So 2 homeworks and a quiz. There will be one more video that I will be assigning for next week, and then, of course, you'll be taking the test, and that'll be it. Hope you all have a good rest of the weekend. Be good, do good. Bye.